Welcome back to Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. We will now continue part 2 of our episode where we interview Curt and Rachel Huff, and we will hear more from Curt about his strange stories.
Well, Curt, something that, you and I have known each other for years and years and years, and I definitely uh, generally consider you to be one of the more skeptical people that I know. It's kind of, at times even something that is, the same about us in a way maybe that we both basically question everything. And I definitely don't know that I would have expected you to have had much in the way of experiences. Although, I mean, maybe you would say the same thing about me, and that would not be, the case. It's something I just don't talk about, and maybe that's just the case with you. What can you kind of give us maybe a background of where you are and where you have been on being a skeptic, and maybe what has changed that for you recently?
Let me interject. You remember the night before the wedding when we were all hanging out in the living room? I got this man to eat Chinese food. Did you think I couldn't make him a non-skeptic?
Yeah,
Introduce him to
to
the
me,
world of Chinese.
that is true. He definitely was violently against Chinese food for a very, very long time.
I
So
just had to put that out there.
that's a good point.
I mean, I ate Chinese food and got food poisoning, 20 years ago. So I was never inclined to eat it again because I don't know, most people after, 10, 15 years of drinking or whatever, develop at least one alcohol that they can't even think about drinking without getting sick. It
Tequila.
was kind of like that for me. Kind of like that for me with
He says this, but he still picks out Chinese restaurants to go to. So
well,
it is what it is.
I mean, once I got back in, I was all in. All right, so skeptically. So I mentioned earlier that I grew up going to a Pentecostal Holiness church, right? And people don't really talk about things like ghosts and all that out in the open. But still, I mean, I experienced things going to church that, I would put behind me later on, but just I don't know if either of you have, oh, I'm sure John has gone to like an old timey, Pentecostal type church before. But
Oh, I sure have.
there is a lot of energy, and when things are reaching ahead towards the end, and the preacher inevitably gets to the hellfire and brimstone part, people are up and down, hallelujah, speaking in tongues, and rolling in the floor speaking in tongues. You feel that energy. So I mean, I can understand why people, you know, it's like an addiction, I guess. And when I was young, I was like, this is God. This is God's energy. It's the Holy Spirit, right? But I mean, just like, you know, was mentioned earlier, I kind of became not necessarily an atheist at a young age, but I mean, one of the deacon's wives, well, his wife, the wife of one of the deacons, there we go, asked me why my dad didn't come every Sunday. And I was just said, well, he stays home and watches the race, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, your dad's going to burn in hell forever. And I was maybe 8 years old. At that point, I was like, these people are fucking assholes. And
Yeah.
like her in particular, her and her husband, he's a deacon. She's this super holier than thou woman. She was always the first one to fall onto the ground and roll around, speaking tongues. And then every Sunday after church, I'd see them down at the gas station renting, R-rated movies.
What
Very hypocritically.
isn't that like a shared delusion of two?
Yeah. But once I got to be about 12, I was like, Mom, I'm not coming anymore. I had it, it's not that I don't believe in God or whatever. It's just that the people there make me uncomfortable. I mean, even after a point before I stopped going, that woman and her husband were asked not to come back. And like she's the sister of the at the time preacher, you know. So I know I wasn't the only one that they rubbed the wrong way, but what really sucked was the deacon. He was on the county board of supervisors forever. But anyway, I didn't really have paranormal. Oh, one of the main reasons that I mentioned the church was that when I started to feel that energy coming around, my eyeballs always kind of vibrated a little bit. So I was like, I don't know what it is, but when I start feeling this spiritual energy, I just feel like, and I don't think they were actually vibrating. My vision doesn't get weird, but it just feels like my entire eyeballs are vibrating at like a high frequency. So moving on, I talked about seeing water witchers and how people rely on that, and people talking about don't go out in the woods at night, all of that. And but anyway, the personally the main thing that I feel like could be at least not necessarily high strangeness, but going to the same kind of survival instinct that she was talking about. There would be times where I would just feel that anxiety drop down into your stomach and the cold blood, cold sweats, and just the ominous total feeling or knowledge that somebody or something is watching me. And I don't see anything around. But so that was pretty much my uh, supernatural experience up until a couple of years ago. I mean, I've always believed in UFOs, not necessarily, they're aliens and yada yada and all that. But, it's for me, it became about scientific provability. Can you prove this thing through scientific experiments and the scientific method, right?
Right.
And I even had my own potential UFO sighting. I used to work a late shift. I'd be driving home at 2 or 3 in the morning, and about halfway home from work on my road, it was a foggy night, and I saw a really bright red light that looked like it was kind of hovering through my windshield, like in the sky towards the left of my windshield. That slowly, kind of crossed the sky and to the other side of my windshield, sat there for a couple seconds, and then kind of looped down and shot off straight upwards until I couldn't see it. Now, it was extremely foggy. So, in that situation, there's a good chance it was just some kind of weird reflection. But anyway, so I guess I'll get to my story. When, well, I'll preface this by saying that she was talking about her generational, you know, inherent ability or whatnot to, understand that something is strange, or, know that there's some kind of energy or spiritual presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has absolutely been inherited by Galen, her son, my stepson. And so the first year that they had moved in with me, there was not long after they moved in, she fell into a really deep depression. And I was very depressed too, but I don't know. Everything was extremely toxic, and we couldn't really understand it. And but Dalen was constantly talking about seeing ghosts, and could be hard to get him to sleep and go to sleep in his room. But we would, one of us every other night would go in there and read him bedtime stories and eventually fall asleep. But what I thought was weird was, well, actually, let me move. Well, she was losing days. Yeah, that's how depressed she was.
I was like losing days. I was like catatonic in bed, just staring at the ceiling. And before I know it, he'd come in and he'd be like, "You really haven't moved in over 32 hours. Like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, has it really been that long? I thought I've just, been here all day, just lounging about, being lazy." But I was like literally losing days. The depression was so bad. And every time I would go to leave the house, like even at that time where we're like trying to come visit you sometimes,
Hmm.
because it was, I had just moved in, new relationship, you're one of his first friends that I met. And
Hmm.
we had discussed, coming to visit you sometimes, but it was every time that I would leave the house, I would get violently ill, like want to throw up and just be absolutely miserable every time I left the house.
Mhm.
Wow.
Well, she was going through this depression, and Dalen was constantly talking about ghosts. And I was just, it's ghosts on real, and yada, yada, yada. So, not long after they moved up, Dalen's best friend, who was 5, died in an accident.
A four-wheeler accident in which
Yeah.
he was crushed.
And that definitely affected him. But
I
anyway,
bet.
things kept getting worse and worse. And finally, Rachel said, there's something wrong here. And I think it's spiritual or something along those lines. And we have to figure out what it is.
The back room that Dalen was so scared of, you could literally open the door in the middle of the day. And that's the built on room. I know you've seen it. That one is the one
Yeah.
with drywall, it's all white. So
Right.
it's a light room. You would open that door in the middle of the day and it was almost pitch black. It was like walking into a black fog.
Wow.
And then
And,
I was like, no wonder Dalen doesn't want to go in here, neither do I.
and I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of getting to that in a minute. But um, so it was just getting worse. And we were setting up one night, and I'm not sure what the driver was, but she was like, I'm gonna go check on Dalen because there's something going on here. I think it might be a ghost, some kind of that dark energy. So when she went to check on Dalen, I was like, you know what? Whatever's here, fuck off. Stop messing with my family. You're not welcome. Go. And what I didn't understand as a skeptic and somebody who had never really had any experience with the supernatural, acknowledging it is like an invitation, which I found out.
You don't open the doorway.
And it's still at this point, I didn't really believe. I'm going to say this in case there is something, that small chance. Well, suddenly, I just felt this horrible feeling that caused me to lay down. And suddenly, there were like pictures flashing in front of my eyes of like certain things that I'll go into in a moment that were like, I was literally experiencing this series of events as if it were literally what I was seeing out of my actual eyes. Now, basically, it was like me getting up, walking to the kitchen, taking out the butcher knife, going to Dalen's room, stabbing her to death, and then stabbing Dalen in the face. And, you know, I couldn't really move. It was kind of almost like a sleep paralysis episode.
But you were straight up awake before
Oh,
this
yeah.
happened. This is
Oh,
not a
yeah.
nighttime thing. It's during the day.
Yeah. No, this was at night, but I wasn't asleep at all.
Okay.
And so it finally let go. And then she came back and she looked at me and she was like, "Oh, now
What
you
did you
talked to
do?
it. What did you do?" And I told her, and she's like, "God damn it." And so we sat here and we talked about it for a while. And, she's like, "Go, you need to go check on Dalen now. You've made things worse." But so I went into Dalen's room but it was different. In Dalen's room, I couldn't feel it at all. Like I got to the point after that, I immediately was able to feel it. That I'd never felt this energy or whatever it was before. And it was super oppressive, um, almost like a weight pushing on from every side. So I get into Dalen's room and it's different. I don't feel it at all. And I almost feel what I would call like a joyful energy. So like I kind of got down on my knees by Dalen's bed and stroked his hair. So I'm like, we'll keep you. He's asleep. We'll keep you safe. And but it was almost like this energy was kind of enveloping him in a protective way. So I came out, and we only have one cat at the time. My cat, I had kind of noticed it before, but I really took a serious notice of it this time. For the past few months, every night he would sleep in the bathroom that was connected by walls to Dalen's room
Mm-hmm.
under this framed picture on the wall. And I had a snap in my brain of, wait a second, the lady who had lived here before my old roommate and I had moved in had, a lot of dogs. She was an avid animal lover, but she couldn't have kids. She never had kids. And she had passed away the summer before I moved in here. Not in the house, but, and I was like, wait a second. And it dawned on me that this woman, whether it be her ghost or not, but energy from her was protecting Dalen from whatever the other thing was. And, being an animal lover with all her dogs and cats, and it's like my cat was drawn to sleep under her framed, painting on the wall every night when Dalen was in bed. And then, but as soon as I stepped out, I felt the oppressive energy. I went back and we were talking some more, and then I noticed there's kind of a tiny hallway that leads from the kitchen into our bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like 8 feet long. And we were both feeling this oppressive energy now, really, really strongly. And I looked over and I'm like, look, and the hallway was extremely dark, even though we had the overhead lights on. Like it's never been dark that I've noticed before or since like that. And then we go to look in that back room, and or we had looked earlier, and it was like she said, it was like pitch black. This is nighttime, but there's 2 or 3 houses across the street with like dusted on lights, which would should be flooding through these windows, but you couldn't see anything. But now I noticed that darkness in the hallway here, and we run out and look in the back room, and you could see in it. So I don't know if it had kind of moved into here because I had acknowledged it or what. But so we end up calling her Nana, who is she's a very spiritual woman.
She's very Christian.
She's also very Christian, but also in a way, like I was talking about, of almost pagan practice. And like
Right.
one of those things that are you see a lot in old time mountain Christian churches are like the anointing.
Oh
And
yeah.
so she had Rachel get some olive oil, and she prayed. She's in near Asheville, prayed to bless the oil, and they both kind of she spiritually and Rachel physically put their hands on me and prayed. I had a Bible, and the oppressiveness that I'd felt since I had acknowledged this thing kind of faded away. Like it was not, it was still here, but it wasn't almost,
Not attack.
suffocating me like it had been before. So we finally get to sleep. And the next day, we go to this hippie store and buy some sage.
No, we go see John
Well, we did. We went to see John,
because we stopped at the mall in Roanoke and I went and got sage and some other stuff that I needed.
but so when we got home, um,
I kicked them out.
yeah,
I took the painting and told him to take the painting outside and take Dalen. They went down to their parents.
yeah,
For about 30 minutes, I made sure I opened windows, I turned on all the lights, and I cleaned the house. And it was, you know, I'm sure Brittany knows, you know how it is to clean a house like that. Sometimes it's very easy. Trying to cleanse this house was a fight. And besides being like exhausted, it was like every time I was trying to say something, it was like I was getting muffled out. Like I couldn't hear what I was saying. I was saying it and I was getting louder. And it was almost like it was being muffled out or I was getting tongue tied constantly. So I was having to like repeat the process and go through every room. And like he was saying about Dalen's room, like it wasn't in there. I could sit in Dalen's floor and
Mhm.
his room was warm and it was almost like a constant vibrating feeling in his room. Like whatever was there, it was obviously not dark and oppressive, but there was just literally so much energy there. It felt like somebody was just shaking that room.
yeah. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. The whole reason that I had talked about the energy when I was younger in the church and my eyes vibrating, I felt that too very strongly. But she did it. And the reason she had me take the painting was, we're like, maybe this, you know, woman who we think has been watching over Galen is attached to this painting. But
I'm kicking everything out. She ain't gotta go.
she was gone too. But then things turn around a lot for us after that.
That's very interesting. Do you think that it is possible that her grandmother's belief in that practice is what helped in that instance, or do you think there's something more than that to it?
I absolutely think it helped. It was Rachel as well, but
I have family
Right.
members you're fine, that I talk to that even if we don't have the same religious beliefs, I ask their advice. I'm like, what do I do?
Sure.
What is it that's here? What is causing this? Like, how do I get rid of this? And I don't just ask her help, I ask my stepmom's help.
Mhm.
Go through what I believe and how I've cleaned houses before and it becomes this like family group effort of whatever is in here. It is they're doing what they do on their religious aspects on their end. And then I do whatever I believe on my religious aspects on my end. And it, like I said, is it like that whole day was I told my family, I'm like, tonight's the night. Like, and as soon as I kicked them out, I texted everybody. I'm like, don't text back. I'm going to clean the house now. So it was a thing where everybody knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And they all know that this is like all hands on deck. Like, we're going for it. So it's not just me being in touch with it, it's all of us being in touch with it, but all of us being in touch with it at the same time to fight the same thing.
It sounds like it doesn't matter like the modality, it's really the intention behind it. And so you all had the same intention of we're going to cleanse the space, we're going to, release this dark energy. And so your approach may have been different than, other family members, but it was the same energetic intention behind it.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Do you still have the painting?
I painted over it and I made it by painting. I was messing around drawing hands and a pomegranate on it. But I do know that when we took the painting out, the intention was to whatever was attached to it. So it'd be Betty, whatever good vibes and good energy was coming off of it. I didn't want to
Mhm.
get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't think she was attached to it after I did clean the house because this was a long, grueling process that I went through. And I'm going to assume whatever was in here kind of kicked rocks. But when we brought the painting back in, it wasn't the same.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
It didn't have the same energy, but I kept the painting because it now is kind of sentimental to us. I mean, it has a meaning. Like I did paint over it and make it mine, but we know that the original painting and what is underneath that is something that we both shared together.
Mhm.
And it's the first moment that he's ever experienced something like that.
Yeah.
And my thing is, I kept trying to tell him, I was like, I don't think you want to open that door. Like, some doors are meant to be closed. Like, don't open the door. Don't communicate with it. Whatever you're trying to communicate with, it's not nice. You don't want to know what it wants.
Kurt, had you ever experienced anything like that before Rachel and Dalen had moved in? No.
Nope. Nope. Not at all. But since then, I've had many experiences. Nothing is visceral,
Right.
but there have definitely been multiple times since that Dalen is constantly talking about seeing ghosts here. And I think a lot of it's just kid stuff, but I don't know if it always is.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there have been many a time that I've now started to see like strange moving shadows that shouldn't be there. But I feel like for some reason, this house, I don't know if it's the house itself. I mean, this it's only been here since the 60s or 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it's the house itself or the land that it's on.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like it draws in energy,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be ghosts or because we have
I have a different theory.
which are well, at least when it comes to the dark energy, we definitely wondered if because I that energy, aside from being dark and the other being light, they felt very different. And that, like, I didn't, you could say it was like a demonic energy, but no, like, I didn't think it was demon. I don't really believe in demons. I
Right.
don't think, and it didn't seem like it was a ghost. It was just dark energy. Whereas the other one very clearly felt like almost conscious, at least partially conscious. And, you know, it seems to me like that would be more classically what somebody would feel or consider to be a ghost, or at least, energy that someone has left behind
Sure.
that might be a figment of the aura or spiritual energy of a person. But the other just felt like, I'm not going to say evil, but darkness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Malevolent.
yeah, malevolent darkness. And what we both talked about and theorized was that my former roommate may have created that situation because he had issues, and he was always extremely depressed, and it seemed like he not through any conscious effort but may have just kind of attracted dark energy to him, and so that could have been what brought it. But I still feel like, in my opinion, that there's some kind of magnetic energy to this house or area that kind of attracts things.
Yeah, me and Dalen.
That too.
Me and Dalen are both empaths.
Mm-hmm.
So we feel any change in anything, whether it be people or your surroundings. And my thing is with him being so little and not understanding things, it's quite easy for somebody who doesn't understand things to open doors they don't understand
Right.
and just kind of open up their mind to things that they don't realize they are, and then that gives you the opportunity to have something sneak in.
And he is an empath on a boggling level. Like, he is extremely emotionally manipulative, and I don't necessarily think it's a conscious thing he's doing. And it's not from a, narcissistic manipulative kind of viewpoint where, somebody would tells lies and uh gaslight you into believing something other than is what is true or what you want to believe. It's just almost like he projects his energy and makes you feel it.
Mm.
So he's very good at getting his way at
Mhm.
times.
Persuasive.
But I mean, not really. He's horrible at persuading with his words. And just like all kids are.
Yeah.
But one thing that really opened my eyes was my cousin and his father. I grew up with my cousin. And 11, 12 years ago, he and his father were both killed in an accident with a drunk driver.
Yeah.
And, we were very close, and it affected me very much for a long time. I still miss him, but he was in a bunch of bands, and there was a benefit concert for him not long after that, after he and my uncle passed. And one of his best friend is a great artist, and he did a flyer poster for it where he, used, I'm not sure what drawing medium he used, but he did a picture
That was a great
of
image.
cousin,
I remember that.
great image. And so one day, a few years ago, I have it hanging up in our living room, framed. And one day, a couple years ago, Dalen's like, "Who is that man in that picture right there?" I said, "Well, that's my cousin." I said, "Why?" He said, "I've seen him here before."
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
He had no idea who he was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah,
But
he's a kid. He had no way of knowing, and he passed long before you met these guys. So, this,
but but I know when something's happening now, because on occasion I'll start to feel that vibration in my eyeballs. The one thing that she and I like to do is antiquing. We like to go to antique stores, and it never fails in antique stores that you come across things that are invested with some kind of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And we will walk around, and one of us will be like, "Hey, I think this thing, don't touch this." And the other will walk around and be like, "Oh, yeah, no." Because I'll just be walking by whatever item or looking at whatever item, and my eyes start vibrating. And, when her stepmom and Nana were up here visiting one time, we went to the big antique store in town. And, she was very overwhelmed. Rachel talked about how sensitive she is to, spirits and energies, and she couldn't stay in there very long. But I've just, ever since then, it's just an experience that made me just understand, oh, hey, there is something to this. I still don't necessarily think it's, hey, there's ghosts, but I'm very much more open and believing to the fact that there's something
other
or
than what you see. Yeah.
some kind of energy that is affected in some way that we would consider spiritually.
Mhm.
I still talk like a skeptic when it comes to things, but much more of an accepting skeptic.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, I think that the word skeptic has kind of been co-opted by people who are they just want to be debunkers. What a
Yeah.
skeptic is supposed to be is someone who has not made up their mind about a thing. They want more information about a thing, or they don't care about the thing. You know, it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to mean someone who's trying to disprove a thing. You know, that's what a debunker is, and it's kind of been co-opted over the past several decades, in my opinion. So I think that there's nothing wrong with the idea of being a skeptic who has experienced the thing and is open to different ideas. The antique shop thing you guys are talking about is super interesting for me. When Brittany and I first got together, there were a couple of things in my house that she would be like, where did this come from? And I'd be like, well, my brother, he goes to those types of places and he finds interesting things, and sometimes he finds really old things he finds interesting, or things he'll just grab lots of stuff. And anything he think that I would be interested in, he would send to me. So there's a couple of really old carved statues, a couple of other items that kind of were randomly displayed throughout my house that she kind of got, really, would you say, a weird feeling about, maybe.
Mhm.
um
Yeah.
and she's like, these things need to be cleared, and she took care of that, and a couple of things we've actually removed from being displayed. They're away now. um but unerringly, and having no information previous to this about the fact that that's where they came from, those were specifically the items that she had those feelings about in my house, in what is now our house. Something that's interesting to me about the way that this has played out with you guys, and you having the experience that you had and now are able, are feeling the things you're feeling. And somebody that I bring up a lot in these episodes, and here I thought I was going to be able to go an entire episode without talking about John Keel, which is the guy who wrote the Mothman Prophecies and many other books. He had kind of a unified theory of what we call the paranormal or the supernatural, and he felt that there's something that humans have that's not currently scientifically measurable, that a lot of times we call ESP, or psychic ability. And he
Mhm.
felt that sometime in the future we would end up with some way to meter that. And I think that that may be in the future, but he felt that everyone is either somewhere from almost zero, but not quite zero, to very high on a spectrum. And he also felt that the people who are very high on that spectrum, who have the ability, um, for lack of a better word, ability to perceive and interact with these things, if you spend enough time with someone who is like that, it can amp up even someone who's almost at zero. And the stories that you just told reminded me of that theory he had, that if it was him talking to you, he would probably assert, or at least presume, that her lifetime of picking up on energies caused you to become more in tune with that stuff. Like your frequencies are more aligned now. It's
Mhm.
another way of saying that, if you like that better.
Well,
I agree.
I mean,
100%.
yes, but also like I can look back now at things all throughout my lifetime that I can now recognize. Hey, that was probably this, and that was probably this, and that was probably this. But I had no frame of reference, I
Mhm.
guess.
Sure.
So it never occurred to me that, hey, this could be, somewhere where there's some kind of energy, yada yada. This is especially the situations where my body and everything knew that something was looking at me,
Yeah.
but there was no one around.
Mhm.
And I don't know. But yeah, the antiquing has definitely become an interesting.
Hobby.
That's a super interesting thought for sure, and maybe something that can be explored in other ways as well. That's super interesting to me. Have you ever come across an item that you had the opposite feeling about? That was like, oh, this has a very positive like vibe to it.
Well, I haven't had any aside from this one clown doll.
Clown
Oh
doll.
yeah, Raggedy. But no, it was a Raggedy Ann doll. But it was like a homemade
Mm-hmm.
that had to be like 100 years old. But for the most part, when I've come across things, not just antiquing, but sometimes otherwise, the antiquing is an easy experiment and searching for spiritual energies or whatnot because it's a bunch of old shit brought together in one place. And old stuff that has been around for 50, 100, 150, 200 years has had much more time to accumulate energies or whatnot. But
Mm-hmm.
I've felt the eyeball vibration many a times now, specifically antiquing, but that's the only time I've ever felt any kind of, I don't know, emotional or sense of positive or negative with anything. Usually it's just, oh, there's something going on with this thing. I'm like, hey, Rachel. And she's like, oh, yeah, there
Yeah.
is. And
Well,
we were upstairs when her stepmom was with us. And I was walking by. I don't know if you've probably been in big antique malls before, where it's just rooms and rooms, and they're all piled up and not piled up, but all kinds of little sections, almost like a labyrinth.
hmm
And I walked past this little dead end area, and I was like, "Oh shit! I felt something here." And I had her stepmom come over because she was telling us all these things that she was getting from all these objects, and I was like, "You guys walk by, but I know there's something going on here." And she said, "Oh yeah," and she pointed out exactly what it was. See, I couldn't figure out. Normally, I can't pinpoint exactly what it's coming from. I just know it's something right there.
hmm
But and she was like, "I'm so proud of you." I never thought that you would be able to sense something like that.
I just run around yelling, "Don't touch that."
That's fair. Yeah, I would want that warning as well, just in case anyone
Yeah.
who's also on this interview is paying attention. I would also like to be told not to touch things if they don't need to be touched, just in case. I'm not ruling anything out.
Tell,
It's interesting to me that you just a kind of an aside, and I'm not someone who kind of assigns these types of valuations to things, but there's lots of maybe modern mythology would be a good way to say about old handmade, specifically Raggedy Ann dolls. The most famous being Rick and Lorraine Warren, the people who like the Annabelle movies are based off of. They were real ghost hunters. They were real
Ed,
like
yeah, Ed and
like
Lorraine, but
actual.
I think they're kind of. I have opinions on them, but
Well, I think
we
that
won't go
that
into
they
that now.
they hype. I do think that it's proven that they hype things up, but there are definitely people who honestly believe some of the things that they said were actually real, and they did really do investigations, and they had a collection. From where I understand, they had a collection of handmade Raggedy Ann dolls that they said were haunted. So it's interesting to me that you would have a weird feeling about one of those, especially if you don't previously have that in your head of that's part of the modern mythology of potentially haunted things. Whether I believe it, I don't know, but that is the thing it's in the mythology.
Yeah, but I'm still gonna say you don't want to touch it.
Yeah, stay away.
Don't touch. But as you were saying, like some people are able to bump other people up into feeling things. Like I agree because I feel like we are all so much more than just what science can tell us we are.
Hmm.
And I mean, especially when you're in a relationship. And I mean, I'm going to say this is you're the first relationship that I've seen John in, and you are the first person that I've ever seen make John happy.
Oh.
And I am biased. I better be invited to the wedding.
For
But
sure.
I absolutely, you know, I can just feel how happy he is now that he's with you. And I don't mean like, oh, he's smiling. I mean, I can feel it.
Hmm.
He radiates it, whether he realizes it or not. And I think it's fantastic. But I also feel like I said, is we are more than just what science can tell us. And being in a relationship with somebody, you get to learn so much about them spiritually and the things they believe, the things they've been through. And the way that I look at it personally is you got doors in your brain that have been locked, you know, things you lock away, you don't think about. And then when you get in a relationship with somebody, you start opening these doors, allowing somebody into yourself.
Yep.
And I feel like once you start doing that and you start open these doors in your mind, then you're much more susceptible to opening up to anything, like any type of energy. And like science can't explain everything.
Right.
And I do think that a lot of it is you kind of just, when you're with somebody long enough, you kind of pick up on who they are as a person and what they believe. And then you kind of open a door and show them, hey, this is what this is. And then it allows them to understand, oh, that's what this feeling is. And then it becomes a like mutual understanding of what's going on. And maybe it won't be the seeker and the skeptic for too long. You might not be too skeptical after this.
Yeah,
Might convert you.
he's definitely more open-minded. I mean, and like he said, that's how he perceives a skeptic, is being open-minded, asking those
Absolutely.
questions. But um, you know, I'm not trying to toot my own horn over here, but I do think that we're doing that, like he's doing this now, I think, because we're together, right? Like this door for you, Jonathan, would have been closed had I not waltzed into your life. Is
No,
that true?
I walked away from metaphysics years and years and years ago. I definitely was no longer. I you know, from childhood on to my mid-20s, I had a lot of very strange experiences that most of which I can't really have a great explanation for. Some of it I've got theories. Some of it is just like, okay, that was strange. And you know, I have spent a lot of time. Well, I've spent a number of years just trying to forget all of it, and then you know, but other than those years, I spent my life trying to figure out what and why the majority of it is, and still trying to do so. You know, I read a lot about this kind of stuff, and you know, especially when I was younger, I read a lot more about that kind of stuff. I'm getting back into it now, and you know, going back into those places, and I've actually been doing some kind of deep dive on a town I used to live in called Lumberton, North Carolina. We're hoping to have some future podcasts featuring some people from there. We're in some talks, which we're very excited about, but can't really talk about yet. At least not on something that we're going to be putting out there. So you know, I definitely have had a life of strangeness. Um, so my skepticism is not whether someone's experiencing something they say they're experiencing. My skepticism is I don't think that we as a people have any idea of what any of this really means, or at least most of us don't have a good idea. And I could speak for 30 hours on why I think that the religion of one thing is wrong, or our idea of the science of another thing is wrong. I do think that science will eventually catch up with this stuff, but it might not be within our lifetime. I mean, there was a time that the atom was a theory, and that sounds really foreign to us, you know, in 2023 when we're you know thinking about quantum physics now. But like you know, there was you know there was a time when I mean, there's just so many things. Like science is so young in the grand scheme of humanity, and humanity is so young in the grand scheme of the universe that you know to say that anything is unmeasurable by nature, I think is silly. And I think that eventually science will science will catch up. But until then, I think that there are other ways of trying to figure out what these things are and why they're happening the way they're happening.
Well, and like we've talked about before, it's like these are things that you can't easily replicate. So it's really hard to use a scientific method to study, paranormal phenomenon. It's like, how do you replicate that in a scientific setting? I'm sure there are ways, and hopefully science will catch up and more, smarter people than me will start studying this stuff. But
as long as I'm not, one of the subjects in which they try to get me highly emotional to tell them things, I think we're okay.
yeah,
Because I would prefer let's not do that one for science.
yeah, involve somebody else, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that ahead.
One
Yeah.
thing that I like to do in these episodes is when either us as hosts or the people we're speaking to talk about something that is not necessarily readily accessible. I try to give definitions when I can, and so kind of speaking to anyone listening that has not heard of what Curt was talking about towards the beginning of the podcast of speaking in tongues. Basically, in evangelical Christian, in a nutshell, because you could talk about this for 30 hours too. In a nutshell, in evangelical Christianity, especially either Pentecostal or apostolic heritage, there is what I would call a form of channeling that happens, that is often called being slain in the spirit, but is also sometimes mentioned as being touched by the Holy Spirit. Usually it's during a musical part of a church session where the people in the congregation of the church begin to some of them will convulse, some of them will say that they are dancing but cannot stop dancing. A lot of times they will do something that is termed as speaking in tongues, which is a tradition that comes from the book of Acts within the New Testament, that what sounds to outsiders as gibberish, and will often have another person within the congregation give what they say is an interpretation of what that supposed potential gibberish is. Collectively, generally, is called being slain in the spirit, and it seems, at least to me and a lot of other people, to kind of mirror what would be a mass channeling effect in other traditions. So everybody can take that for what they want to take it for.
Yeah, the church I went to always called it being touched by the Holy Ghost. So
yeah, touched by the Holy. There you go, Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit. There's a bunch of different ways of terming these things.
Well, this has been a very interesting, thought-provoking conversation. I've really appreciated talking to you guys.
Oh yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, thanks for talking
Yeah.
with us, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Hope you've
we're
enjoyed it like we have.
very happy to. I'm sure we may have other things we could talk about in the future.
I think so. I think so.
Haunted houses I've lived in almost all of them I've lived in.
Mhm.
So I've got those too.
Yep.
Yeah, some people are just lucky to have a whole life full of strange things.
Mhm.
See you later.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a strange story you want to share with us, email us at seekerandskeptic@gmail.com. We look forward to talking to you soon.